Camille Ford stood in front of the entrance, just like she had every morning for the past 7 years. Same badge, same door, same routine. But this time, the scanner beeped red. Once, twice, a third time. She paused, looked at the little light on the reader like it had betrayed her. The security guard, Marcus, the one who always joked about her quiet coffee addiction, wouldn't meet her eyes. He stared down at his clipboard like it suddenly mattered. "Systems down?" she asked, forcing a smile. He didn't answer, just mumbled something about orders from upstairs. Then her phone buzzed. One email. Subject line, termination, effective immediately. No explanation, no warning, just locked out like she never existed. No exit meeting, no thank you, not even a folder with her name misspelled. She didn't cry, she didn't yell, she just walked back to her car, hands cold, heart even colder. How do you spend years building something only to be shut out like you were never there? How do you disappear from a system that runs on your bones? Before I tell you what she did next, where in the world are you watching this from? And more importantly, have you ever been treated like you were replaceable? Drop a comment below if this hits close to home. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Camille sat in her car for a long while. The parking lot was mostly empty now, save for a few early birds and a delivery van humming by in the distance. The morning sun didn't feel warm. It just glared down like an overhead light in an interrogation room. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just breathed. For the first time in years, without the weight of inbox alerts, sprint deadlines, or Brandon's buzzword-filled rants echoing in her head, she turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled awake, but her hands stayed still on the wheel. No plan, no destination. She drove. Through the same intersections she passed every Monday. Past the vegan donut shop she never tried. Past the coffee place she used to visit on release nights, back when she still believed her work meant something. By 10:03 a.m., she was back in her apartment. Quiet, familiar. The moment her front door clicked shut, her personal laptop tucked away on the kitchen counter blinked once. Then again, Camille noticed the faint pulse from across the room. She walked over, opened the lid. There it was, a terminal window. Black screen, single line of text. Sentinel protocol, phase 1, initialized. Her finger hovered above the trackpad. No password needed. It recognized her. Camille didn't smile, but something behind her eyes shifted. She poured herself a cup of tea, sat down slowly, and watched as the lines of code began to scroll, calm, precise, like a machine waking up from hibernation. Years ago, she wrote those scripts late at night, not to cause chaos, not out of spite, but for moments like this, moments when the system needed to remember who built it, and now it had. Camille sipped her tea, gaze steady on the screen. Phase 2, scheduled, 10:27 a.m. The countdown had started, and no one at Solentra even knew it. Not yet. The rain had started. Not a storm, just that steady kind of drizzle that coated everything in silence. Camille sat by the window watching tiny rivers trace their way down the glass. Her laptop screen still pulsed faintly on the counter, like a heartbeat. 7 years. That's how long she'd been at Solentra. A 6-month contract that turned permanent then, permanent turned invisible. She hadn't come in with big ambitions. Just wanted to build something that worked, something solid. Back then, the back end was a disaster. No versioning, no redundancy. Half the servers were named after office pets. She fixed them, quietly, without credit, because that's what she did. She remembered the early days. Folding tables for desks, a server rack shoved into what used to be a supply closet. Brandon wasn't even around then. He showed up 2 years ago, slick hair, big watch, louder than necessary. The kind of guy who loved words like synergy and velocity, but couldn't explain what a DNS record actually did. The first time they met, he looked at her badge, squinted, and said, "So what do you actually do here?" Camille didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, thought about the monitoring system she rebuilt from scratch, the fallback routines she wrote when everyone else was home for the weekend, the skeleton keys she tucked away, not to control, but to protect. She'd blinked once, then said with a shrug, "Just legacy support. Let 'em think that. Let them all think that." Because by that point, the infrastructure had already grown beyond their understanding. She didn't just build the system, she was the system. And all the documentation, it lived inside her. Or more precisely, inside the shadows she left behind. The kind of shadows that don't make noise until someone turns off the light. The tea had gone cold, but Camille didn't mind. She sat at the edge of her couch, legs tucked beneath her, the same position she used when debugging long scripts on Sunday nights. Only this time, she wasn't debugging. She was observing. On her screen, a quiet stream of logs rolled upward, crisp and clean. No alarms, no flags, just movement. The kind that only meant one thing. Sentinel Protocol had reached Phase 3. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud. That was never the point. Camille had written it years ago, buried beneath layers of redundancy and decoy code. It was built to activate only under one condition: forced exit without continuity. No offboarding, no key transfer, no handshake. Exactly like today. She hadn't thought about this part in a long time. Not since the late nights in her second year when she realized Solentra was scaling too fast, faster than its leadership could comprehend. She knew then that trust wasn't enough. Trust could be revoked in an email. So she built something smarter, a protocol that didn't retaliate. It recorded, it scanned, it prepared. Now at 10:12 a.m., it was sweeping through mirrored backups, comparing access footprints, tracking inconsistencies. Not to destroy, not yet, just to notice. She watched the screen like she was watching the weather, calm, unblinking. Then her phone lit up, a message from Rita. "Cam, I just saw your name's gone from Slack." What's going on? Camille stared at the text for a moment, then replied with a single emoji. Fog, undefined, unreadable. She didn't want sympathy. She didn't need an audience. All she needed was time, because in exactly 15 minutes, Phase 4 would begin, and someone at Solentra, maybe Leo, maybe even Brandon, was going to notice something they couldn't explain. Not yet. The first oddities showed up around 12:47 p.m. Leo, a junior systems engineer, barely 6 months into the job, was eating cold pizza at his desk when he noticed something strange on the dashboard. The logs weren't syncing. Not delayed, just missing, like a page torn out of a book. He refreshed. Nothing. Closed the tab. Reopened. Still nothing. At first, he assumed it was just Jenkins acting up again. It wasn't unusual. The pipeline hiccuped every now and then, especially after weekend deploys. But this didn't feel like a hiccup. This felt like silence. The kind that made your stomach tighten. He opened the terminal, ran a basic query, then stared. The access keys for their monitoring cluster had been overridden, not expired, not revoked, just gone, and in their place, a string of garbled characters that didn't match any of their internal formats. Leo leaned back in his chair. "That's weird," he mumbled. Across the room, in a shared pod with too many monitors and not enough airflow, Serena glanced up. "Restart the agent," she said flatly, eyes still glued to her own screen. "I did." Pause. More silence. Back at Camille's apartment, the rain had stopped. Her tea was fresh, her laptop was quiet. But the system, it was anything but. Sentinel had entered Phase 4, scanning API gateways, checking for credential drift. It didn't trigger alerts. That would be too obvious. Instead, it flagged inconsistencies in logs that no one looked at unless something went terribly wrong, like now. At Solentra HQ, Leo pulled up an old server map, hoping to trace the anomaly. That's when he saw it, an environment labeled C_Ford_shadow, nested in a group no one remembered creating. He blinked. "Hey," he said louder this time, "has anyone ever seen this config before?" No one answered. But someone should have, because the smoke was rising, and fire was not far behind. By 1:26 p.m., the whispers had turned into noise. The staging dashboard froze mid-refresh. The loading icon spun endlessly, refusing to yield. Then, without warning, it blinked out. Blank screen. No error message, just nothing. Serena was the first to say it out loud. "Is Jenkins down?" Her voice carried across the engineering pod, where monitors were beginning to flicker and reconnect like faulty Christmas lights. Leo, still digging through unfamiliar folders, glanced up from his terminal. "It's not just Jenkins," he said. "Vault Access is throwing 403s across the board." Slack lit up within seconds. #engineering help filled with urgent pings. "Anyone else locked out of the CI pipeline? Why are my tokens invalid? Is the backup job gone?" No one had answers, only questions. Across the hall, in a glass-walled conference room, the CTO, Deborah Lynn, stared at her screen in disbelief. A customer-facing analytics node had just flatlined. No logs, no alert history, like it had never existed. She reached for her phone and called IT. It rang twice. No answer. Then she noticed something that made her stop breathing for a second. The login history for one of the internal nodes, the one tied to critical billing scripts, showed a last access timestamp from 2 minutes ago. But the listed user, C_Ford_admin, retired, inactive, offboarded at 9:12 a.m. She double-checked, triple-checked. The line was still there. Downstairs, Leo stood frozen at his desk. The file structure he'd opened earlier was now empty. Entire folders vanished. "And no deletion logs to explain it," Serena whispered. "Did we just get breached?" Leo didn't answer, because deep down, he was starting to realize this wasn't an outside attack. It was something else, something already inside. And whatever it wasn't done yet. At 3:02 p.m., the executive floor started to feel it. Brandon Miles was in his corner office rehearsing a pitch for next week's investor call. Behind him, the city skyline stretched wide, indifferent. On his desk, his tablet buzzed first once, then twice, then constantly. He didn't check right away. He figured it was another Slack thread full of questions he didn't want to answer. But then his assistant cracked the door. "Brandon, you might want to come downstairs." He frowned. "Is this about the dashboards again? Just tell DevOps to roll back." "They can't." He looked up. "What do you mean, can't?" "I mean, they tried, and they got locked out." Downstairs, panic had taken root. Credential resets failed. Recovery scripts returned null. Every time someone tried to override access controls, the system responded with a simple message: "Permission denied. Root token invalid." It made no sense. CTO Deborah Lynn stood over Leo's shoulder now, eyes scanning fast. Every workaround she knew ignored. Every override path cut off. Rita from the data team had joined the crowd around the main cluster terminal. She whispered more to herself than anyone else. "It's like someone walled us out from the inside." Brandon finally appeared, looking irritated, not scared. Yet, "Just call her," he said. "Get Camille on the line. Offer her whatever. A check, a contract, I don't care." Deborah shook her head. "We've tried. She's locked out of the system. Her phone number's been reassigned. We have no way to reach her." Brandon's voice sharpened. "You mean she won't respond?" Deborah stared at the screen. "No," she said. "I mean, we literally can't." The room went quiet, save for the hum of machines beginning to stall. Then someone asked the question no one wanted to answer. If Camille built all of this, who has control now? By late afternoon, desperation had turned into obsession. Deborah had shut herself in the server war room, an old storage space with peeling paint and a desk fan that never worked right. The hum of machines filled the air like tension you could breathe in. Across her monitor were strings of error logs, system rejections, ghosted pings. Nothing made sense. Everything was vanishing in ways that shouldn't be possible. Then she saw it, a line buried deep in the internal backup index, a repository tucked inside a forgotten S3 bucket, one of the oldest entries in the company's archive. The folder name, cake_recipe_final_final_V3. Deborah didn't hesitate. She unpacked it. Inside was a single file, a full schematic of Solentra's infrastructure. Layers and layers of subnets, keys, dependency trees, encryption flow, all mapped out like a living system. But this wasn't standard documentation. It was elegant, meticulous, and completely foreign to everyone who touched the system in the last 2 years. At the bottom of the access tree, listed as root authority across every major environment, was one name, C. Ford, and next to it in gray text, admin retired, 9:12 a.m. She stared at the screen, then reached for her radio. "Leo," she said, "you need to see this." He entered quietly, still shaken from the last 2 hours. Deborah turned the screen toward him. "I think she was the only one." He blinked. "Only what?" Deborah's voice dropped. "The only one who understood what any of this actually is." Outside, the office buzzed with frantic calls, confused clients, and spinning status pages. Inside, Deborah leaned back slowly, the weight of realization settling in. Camille hadn't just written the system. She was the architecture, and they erased her without ever understanding what that meant. What they didn't know yet was that she hadn't erased herself. She had just gone quiet. By 6:10 p.m., Solentra's executive Slack channel was on fire. The dashboards were gone, the backups weren't loading, customer contracts were being flagged, and the support team was fielding calls with no answers but plenty of apologies. Brandon stood in front of the war room's main screen, tie loosened, voice rising with every sentence. "This is unsustainable," he snapped. "We need Camille back, now." Deborah didn't look up. "We've already tried," she said quietly. "Then try again," he turned to the legal rep. "Can we make her an offer?" "Technically, yes, but she's under no obligation." "Then make it a damn good one," Brandon barked. 50 grand. No, 75 for the first hour. Just get her on the phone." Across town, Camille stood in her kitchen, placing a kettle on the stove. The evening light was soft. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She didn't reach for it. Just let it ring. Then a message from her attorney popped up. They're requesting a one-time consulting session. Critical infrastructure recovery. They're offering $100,000 for 2 hours of access. Camille read the message slowly. No rush, no surprise. She walked to the window, watching the last rays of daylight slip behind the trees. Then picked up her phone and replied with a single sentence. "It's not about the money." She hit send, turned the phone face down, and exhaled. For the first time in years, her silence spoke louder than any negotiation. Back at Solentra, Brandon slammed his laptop shut. "What does that even mean?" he muttered. Deborah said nothing, because deep down, she already knew the answer. And somewhere, quietly, the system had just advanced one more step. Phase 10 was now in motion, and there was no pause button left. At 10:06 p.m., the first system flatlined. No warning, no blinking lights, just silence. One of Solentra's main customer dashboards timed out, then vanished entirely. The browser returned a 500 error with no traceable path. Support tickets flooded in within minutes. Deborah stared at her screen, frozen. She'd seen outages before, memory leaks, bad deploys, a rogue script or two, but this was different. This wasn't failure, this was absence. Across the floor, engineers scrambled to trace the root cause, but every rollback failed. Every backup image was either corrupted or simply missing. Someone tried a hard restore from the week prior, but the system rejected it, citing an integrity mismatch. It was like trying to restore a photograph of a person who no longer existed. By 10:38 p.m., Solentra's financial environment shut down completely. The reconciliation scripts disappeared from the pipeline. Access logs stopped updating. Then even the access logs themselves were erased. Rita stared at her screen. Her terminal had just returned a single line of text: Vault unreachable. Access revoked by root. Leo whispered, "Who even is root now?" No one answered. Meanwhile, across town, Camille sat on her balcony with a notebook in her lap. Not her work notebook, a personal one, filled with sketches of ideas she never had time to build. Her phone lay face down beside her, silent. Inside her laptop pulsed with clean, quiet logs. Phase 10 complete. No noise, no drama, just the quiet subtraction of systems that no longer remembered who created them. Back at Solentra, Brandon slammed his hands on the table. "Pull the last offline backup," he shouted. "We can't," Deborah said softly. "Why not?" She turned to face him. "Because that backup doesn't exist anymore." And outside, more systems began to fall, one node at a time. And still, Camille said nothing. It was quiet the next morning. No emails, no meetings, no crisis reports. Camille brewed her coffee in silence, watching the steam curl above the mug like a signal only she could read. Outside, the sky was overcast, soft gray and slow, the kind of day that didn't demand anything from you. And for the first time in a long time, Camille didn't feel the need to rush. She opened her laptop, not to check on logs or outages or dashboards, but to build, from scratch. She pulled up an old domain she'd quietly purchased years ago, redcanopy.dev. No company logo, no mission statement, just a blank landing page with a simple message typed in clean serif font, founded by the woman they tried to erase. She clicked open a folder on her desktop labeled Blueprints, filled with designs she'd created on weekends in hotel rooms and during lunch breaks no one ever noticed she skipped. These weren't projects for clients or quarterly roadmaps. They were systems meant to endure, to protect, to respect the engineers who built them. She wasn't building for them anymore. This was for her. No bureaucracy, no performance reviews, no one asking why she didn't smile more at happy hour. Just clean architecture, honest infrastructure, and the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming her voice. Later that afternoon, a message popped into her inbox. It was from Ava Langston, VP of Talent at a small security-focused startup based in Portland. "Saw your name on the forum. Read your post. We're hiring. Would love to talk, even just to listen." Camille stared at the screen for a long moment, then smiled faintly, because maybe the collapse wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the clearing, and now something stronger could finally take root, something with her name on it, this time out in the open. By the time the boardroom lights flickered for the third time that week, Solentra was no longer pretending everything was under control. The damage was done. Clients had left, investors were furious, entire systems gone not just offline, but unrecoverable. Brandon quietly transitioned out. Deborah resigned 2 days later, her final email just 3 lines long. And Camille, she was fine. She didn't post online, didn't brag. She kept working on her own terms, carefully, quietly, at her own pace. Red Canopy Dev was slowly taking shape, not with splashy press releases or fundraising hype, but with code that worked, with people who cared. One afternoon, a former intern from Solentra messaged her, just one sentence: "I finally understand what you were building." "I'm sorry no one asked." Camille read it, then closed her laptop. No reply was needed. Because some apologies aren't about words. They're about time catching up to the truth. And the truth is, Camille never wanted revenge. What she wanted was to be heard, to be respected, to be seen not as legacy overhead, but as the architect she always was. Her silence wasn't absence. It was a warning. And when no one listened, the system did what it was built to do: protect its maker. Not every story ends with applause. Sometimes it ends with understanding. Late, maybe, but real. So, if you've ever felt invisible at work or underestimated because you didn't speak the loudest, maybe Camille's story will stay with you a little. Let me ask you this. If you were her, would you have gone back? Or would you have built something better, too? Let me know in the comments. Your story might matter more than you think.